Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. For anyone who thought that the war against Gaza had taken a pause, I assume you know that that is not the case. If not, all I can say is I have bad news for you. The war continues. People continue to be killed in Gaza. Are Israelis being killed? No. Not since the initial jailbreak by Hamas. And again, that's what it was, a jailbreak. And it should be honored as such. But Israel has taken that jailbreak as an opportunity to accelerate its plans, I assume, to take over Palestine. And so for now, they are working on Gaza. I wonder sometimes, although I don't think that this is likely, but I still wonder about it. The Holy Lands includes Jordan. Israel and Jordan have good relations. In particular, Netanyahu and King Hussein have reasonably good relations. So it is hard for me to conceive of a war being fought between Israel and Jordan. But is it out of the question? I would say no. Now, I don't mean to raise alarms where no alarms are necessary. There's no point. But I figured I would simply point that out. Israel is the greatest imperialist nation in West Asia. And as such, it should be looked at very carefully, and its motivations should be viewed with complete skepticism and indeed cynicism, for there is really no way of knowing what Israel will do next. The Zionist entity was founded on the blood of Palestinians as tanks rolled into Palestine, the part of Palestine that was soon to become Israel, destroying buildings and destroying lives. Has the overall objective of Israel changed? No. Are there any anti-Zionist parties in Israel of note? No. Both Likud and Labor, which is in a very minimized status these days, are pro-Zionist. There are certainly anti-Zionist parties, but they have virtually no power at all in Israel. Israel is a Zionist country, which is why I think that the common designation, the Zionist entity, is an appropriate way of describing Israel from 1948 until the present time. And I am not at all optimistic that the current through which Israel has moved over these many decades is about to change course. I simply don't think it'll happen. I hope more than anything in the world right now. I will say that again. I hope more than anything in the world right now that I am wrong. I really hope that. I don't think I'm wrong, but I could be. The problem is that Israel by itself will not change its course. That change in course needs to come from the outside, like the US, not from the inside. And from everything we see right now, including the complete and unqualified support for Israel from the two candidates for presidents of the United States this year, Biden and Trump, there is no reason for hope. No legitimate reason for hope. I am not Pollyannish. I am a realist. I believe in examining the situations as they exist and examining them carefully and examining them thoughtfully and examining them with an eye to understanding the motivations of the parties involved. And it is clear that the motivations for the Palestinians are liberation or emancipation, whereas the motivations for the Zionist entity are imperialism. Therefore, I would say that any Marxist, any communist, whether Marxist or anarchist, worth her or his salt, needs to support Palestine and the liberation of Palestine from the Zionist entity. And even more, I would say, to support a Palestine from the river to the sea. Does that mean that no Jews would be allowed to live there? I hope not. I hope that's not the case. I would like to see a Palestine that is multi-ethnic, multiracial, multinational, but one that is not controlled and dominated by a single religion. We already have religious or theocratic states with Islam. We can point, for example, to Iran, although Iran is not that extreme. More extreme than Iran is Saudi Arabia. With Christianity, we can point to Vatican City. And honestly, I can't think of any place in the world other than Vatican City, which is a true Christian theocracy. Although the United States is getting closer, it is hard to say what will happen with Israel, the Jewish theocracy which dominates West Asia, which has tons and tons of nukes, supplied by the greatest superpower in the world, the United States. So again, I I must say that I don't see any real reason to be hopeful about the immediate future. The distant future, maybe, maybe, maybe. If, in fact, when the first world, the capitalist world system, or the empire, whatever name you want to give to it, collapses, which is happening right now, right before our eyes. Most people don't seem to see it. I mean, I get into conversations with people all the time. And I will say that. I will say that the first world, or more commonly, the Western world, is in the process of collapse. And most are oblivious to it. I don't know whether that is because of love for their own countries. Maybe that's a part of it. Perhaps it is because of a simple failure to practice critical thinking. That may also be a part of it. Or a combination of both. I literally don't know. But for a long time, I have seen that. At the same time as I'm watching the first world go down in flames, which it is, most first worlders seem totally ignorant of that firestorm. They're not aware of it. They don't see it happening. And I think that that is, for people like me, who actually hope for that firestorm to accelerate, that in itself may be a hopeful sign. Because if people are not aware of a catastrophe which is engulfing them from all sides, then they are not doing anything to prevent it. They have no defensive structure in place. And I think that is basically true. Instead of defense, we see more and more offense. What is needed to maintain the stability of the world right now, I should say maybe the status quo of the world right now, is defense, not offense. That is not to say that I like the status quo, but at least we are alive here in the Western world. Most of the world is not like Gaza. Most of the world is not like Ukraine. Most of the world is not like Haiti. There is certainly a great deal of poverty throughout the world, but the first world is now in a condition of dominance. The question is, how long will that dominance last? To that question, my only answer can be, who the hell knows? Who the hell knows? I hope it won't be that much longer, because I want the third world to take over where the first world has failed, to begin the struggle for revolutions, a struggle which Marx and Engels erroneously predicted would begin in Europe at the end of the 19th century. And now here we are, closing out the first quarter of the 21st century. And still, the first world is in a position of dominance, but for how much longer? That is a question that I have no ability to answer, and that troubles me all the time. I don't like complete uncertainty about such a devastating global condition. Nothing wrong with ambiguity. I actually like ambiguity because it gives me hope. It gives me hope that the fact that I don't have all the answers right now means that I can continue searching for the answers. If everything was certain or written in stone, there would be literally nothing to search for. So again, that is why I like ambiguity. But my feeling about the world today goes way beyond ambiguity. Complete and total uncertainty about today, about tomorrow, about next week. We literally don't know what will happen in the very near future. That is how precarious the global situation has become. And I don't think that we should expect that global situation to improve anytime soon. So, with that said, as the introduction to this podcast, I will once again put on my spectacles and read for you an article from CNN. It is titled "Devastation in Gaza as Israel Wages War on Hamas." As I said, the idea that the war in Hamas as a whole is taking a pause is not true. There are certain units that have moved out and are presumably resting and relaxing. Something that they definitely do not deserve, in preparation for new offenses in Gaza. But even now, the terrorist campaign by the Zionist entity is continuing. So, this is a part of the story which is titled "Israeli Airstrike Kills 14 People Ahead of Eid, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital spokesman says." Eid is an important celebratory time of the Islamic calendar. Here's the story. An Israeli airstrike on a residential building in the Nuseirat refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip killed 14 people Tuesday evening. It is Tuesday today. Now, Israel is in a different time zone. Gaza is in a different time zone, but bear in mind that here in North America, it is Tuesday. According to Khalil al-Dikran, the spokesperson of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. He told CNN that most of those killed were women and children. And 30 others were seriously injured. The information was also confirmed by the civil defense in Gaza. Were those women and children who were killed by the Israeli Defense Forces members of Hamas? Were they? I would really like not only an answer, because Israel lies all the time. You can't trust what Netanyahu or members of his government say. Their words are basically meaningless and should not be relied upon by anyone because they lie over and over again. What I would like to see is evidence. Now, what that evidence would be, I have no idea. But I would assume if Israel claims that it is waging a war on Hamas, that it possesses that evidence. So whether I know what it is or not is not important. What's important is what Israel claims to know. Claims to know about who it is killing. CNN has reached out to the Israeli Defense Forces for comment. Period. End of sentence. In other words, no response. In a video posted on social media, several children are seen being rushed into the hospital, where doctors inspect them on the floor, their bodies dusty and covered in blood. Another video shows the uncovered bodies of 3 dead children next to other bodies wrapped in blankets. This is a quotation from a medical doctor by CNN. Our hospital is very catastrophic as it's on the brink of collapse. Our reception area is full of the injured, and people are on the floor. And we tried to do triage tents outside the hospital entrance, but that's also full of injured people. And capacity is already beyond 100%. As well, we lack medical supplies and medicine and anesthetics. That was the quotation by this physician to CNN. The attack happened on the last night before Eid al-Fitr, one of the most important holidays of the Islamic calendar, marking the end of Ramadan, the Ramadan fast, the annual fast that is commemorated by Muslims. Here's another story on the same page. This story is called Biden Calls Netanyahu's Approach to War Against Hamas, quote unquote, a mistake. A mistake? It's not a mistake. It's intentional. Israel is not making a mistake. It's doing what it wants to do. I don't know what he means by a mistake. I assume he does. Maybe he means it's a mistake to him, but it's not a mistake to Netanyahu. Netanyahu knows perfectly well what he is doing and why he is doing it. Okay. Here's the article. U.S. President Joe Biden described Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's approach to the war in Gaza a mistake in one of his sharpest critiques of how the Israeli government is prosecuting the conflict against Hamas. Biden made the comments in an interview with Univision that was taped just days after Israeli military strikes killed 7 World Central Kitchen aid workers. That is that help organization run by a celebrity chef who is apparently very popular with many people in Washington, D.C., which sparked anger and frustration throughout the White House. Here is a quotation from Biden. Well, I will tell you, I think what he is doing is a mistake. I don't know what he is talking about. Not to Netanyahu, it's not a mistake. I mean, he did it. I don't agree with his approach. I think it's outrageous that those 3 vehicles were hit by drones, taken out on a highway where it wasn't like it was along the shore. It wasn't like there was a convoy moving them. Okay, fine. So I agree with Joe Biden. What he is saying is true. The question now is, what will he do? I mean, the logical thing, I think, would be to immediately cut off all military and economic assistance to Israel. And that's it. Will that happen? No. So Biden may call this a mistake, but perhaps that is an intentional use of the word mistake. Because by calling it a mistake, he's saying that the action perhaps was not deliberate. It was accidental, which is what a mistake means. But clearly, the action was deliberate. Maybe that's what he means by calling it a mistake. He's trying to argue that Netanyahu, did an oopsie. He did an oopsie. Okay. The president added that he's calling for Israel to agree to a ceasefire and that there is, quote unquote, no excuse for not sending in humanitarian aid. And here's another quote from Joe Biden. What I'm calling for is for the Israelis to just call for a ceasefire, allow for the next 6-8 weeks total access to all food and medicine going into the country. I've spoken with everyone from the Saudis to the Jordanians to the Egyptians. They're prepared to move in. They're prepared to move this food in. And I think there's no excuse to not provide for the medical and food needs of those people. It should be done now. The confusing part of Biden's statement is that he begins it with calling for a 6 to 8 week ceasefire. Okay. So what happens after 8 weeks have passed? Does that mean that the US will give Israel a green light to go back to the horrendous destruction that it has been imposing upon Gaza up until now? That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, 6 to 8 weeks is not that long. It really isn't that long. That's like a month and a half to 2 months. That's all it is. So I don't know what Biden wants or what he's thinking, if he's thinking, what his real objectives are. But it would seem as though Joe Biden is still acting as the Zionist he claims to be. Continuing with the article. The comments came in the lead up to CIA Director Burns delivering a new proposal over the weekend to negotiations in Cairo as they work to secure a ceasefire and hostage deal. There are more articles on this page, but I will stop there. I will provide a link to this page in the discussion portion below the video, so you can read the rest of it if you choose to. But I think that the point has already been made, and that is that Netanyahu is doing everything in his power to avoid ending the war. Whereas Biden is doing everything in his power to avoid prolonging the war. I think that's a fair statement. Biden is not calling for an end of it at all. He wants a respite. What will happen after that respite? Does Biden even know? I doubt it. Does Netanyahu know? Well, I think that would be an irrelevant question because I doubt Netanyahu is planning for such a respite. And so the terror, the destruction in Gaza continues. And there is no realistic chance or probability that the war will end anytime soon. I mean, seriously, if the war was going to end, in my view, it would have ended already. Look at how many war crimes have been committed by Israel. Well, by the same token, we can look at the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and look at the war crimes committed by the United States in those countries. And those wars continued also, at least for a while. But Afghanistan and Iraq do not sit on the borders of the United States. So they were never really a threat or a direct threat to the US, except as imagined by the George W. Bush administration with his manufactured concept of weapons of mass destruction, which turned out to be a complete charade. But here, it's different. It's different. Gaza is literally on the border with Israel. And I would assume that Israel sees Gaza as a threat to its survival, which was not the case with either Afghanistan or Iraq. And so continuing the war from that perspective by the Zionist entity would be the only reasonable, although I hate using the word reasonable here, but whatever, would be the only reasonable course of action to take. It's a reasonable course of action that is thoroughly unreasonable. And that is why within the global community, Israel and the US, for the most part, stand alone. Most of the US's NATO allies have on this issue abandoned the US. I'm not aware of any country besides the US right now which supports the war going on in Gaza. And even though Biden may say that the war should end right now for 6 to 8 weeks, does he really mean it? I mean, is there any meat to what he is saying? Or is it just words that end in mere words? I think the latter is true. He's simply repeating words. They have no significance. They will have no impact, in my view, on what the Zionist entity continues to do in Gaza. And on the eventual goal of Israel, which is clearly stated by them, to take over the lands of Gaza and to force the Gazans into that confined area within Egypt. The only thing I think that is unclear at this point is when that transfer of Gazans into Egypt will take place. That has not been specified. I assume it will occur sometime. When? I don't know. I'm not even sure whether Netanyahu, Biden, whether anybody knows. But that's certainly what the objective is, to get the Gazans out of Gaza, to remove an indigenous population from its homeland. Gaza is not based on any primary historical sources, the homelands of the Jews. For that matter, neither is Israel. Again, we return to sacred history, not to history. That's the problem. Sacred history is fine if you learn it in Hebrew school or Sunday school, okay, or yeshiva, fine, learn it there. But when it becomes implemented as geopolitical politics or geopolitical policy, that is an entirely different matter. Then you are taking mythology and turning it into reality. You are not recognizing a mythology as a mythology. You are considering it to be actual history, which it is not. The supposed history of the Jews in Judah is mythology. It's pure mythology. Might it have happened? Yeah, maybe. Is there any genuine historical evidence for it? No. What there is genuine historical evidence for is the fact that the Gazans have occupied Gaza for a long time, and therefore they deserve to be recognized as the indigenous inhabitants of that region. They are the Palestinians. The Jews are basically Europeans, North Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, and whatnot. To call them indigenous is a simple misuse of the term. I mean, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, and as an Ashkenazi Jew, I'm not indigenous to Israel. I feel no sense of connection with the land of Israel. I don't even want to go there. In fact, I refuse to go there. I refuse. If I were invited, I would decline the invitation. Because to me, going there would, even unintentionally, economically support the nation of Israel. And I won't do that. In simple principle, my views, when I've stated them, have upset people. Okay, fine. I know that. I know that my views are not majoritarian views, and many people find them to be troubling and disturbing. Okay. Do I care? Yes and no. I mean, I don't want to make people uncomfortable, but by the same token, I believe in speaking truth to power. And the only way you can speak truth to power is by being honest. And so I strive to always be honest to the extent of my knowledge, not to lie, not even to fib, to tell the truth as I believe it, as I have observed it, as I have read it from reputable sources, and not to believe the lies of theocrats like Netanyahu, which I don't. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.